welcome to the Dareful Project. I'm your host, Deborah Hotelling. So I was having lunch with a friend and we were talking about how we can reinvent our lives. And my friend told me about one of her girlfriends who started a full career in fitness and wellness, and then at some point was called to rabbinical school. So our guest today, Rabbi Judy Greenfeld, is going to explain to us how you make that transition from fitness to faith and what she's learned along the way. And for any of us who are feeling something, a stirring, those little green shoots, maybe of thinking about faith again, even if we have not been to synagogue or church for a while, how we begin if we are feeling that. Rabbi Judy, welcome.
Welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you and to meet your audience and to chat with you. And these are really important questions that we don't necessarily share with everyone because they're deeper than, playing mahjong or exercising together. But these are the deeper questions that are very important at different stages in our lives. Now, you asked me, how did the fitness world shift into a rabbinical call? Mm-hmm. And truthfully, it came as a huge surprise to me when I look back. If you would have told me that I was going to do the work that I'm doing now, I would have laughed at you and said, you're crazy. Because my evolution to becoming a fitness instructor has a little history. And that is, I always was a dancer. Early on, I must have read some children's book where this girl had weak legs, and she looked out her window and saw a ballet school and saw these girls doing ballet, and she decided she wanted to go, and she got strong, and there's your wellness, but she became, fully functioning and a dancer, and also dancers, so beautiful. So something clicked for me, but I loved it, and I was always in recitals, and I dreamed of being a dancer on Broadway. Well, I followed that, and I went to college, and I did get a degree in dance, but it also came with, an undergrad in kinesiology, a lot more intelligence about what happens to your body, how to keep it fit, all of those things, which I found fascinating. And, after I graduated college, then of course, we tend to get married or think of marriage more, and of course, take care of ourselves financially. So what happened was I didn't have the tools to make dance my business. I did dance professionally, but it wasn't enough. And it was a business that I really did not know how to navigate. And I created, it was those Jane Fonda era.
Yes.
And I hate to admit it, but it's true. And I realized that I could take my dance knowledge and turn that into not only a method for health and wellness, because I was fascinated with health and wellness, but I wanted to do it privately in people's homes. So I created a business called Home Aerobics by Judy. And I actually worked with celebrities. I was in Joan Collins' book. I worked with her. And then that became empty because I also realized that it was a time, I feel like I was what today would be a fitness coach. And I did coach how to eat and how to live correctly. But the evolution of that was also that it makes you ask those big questions. Like, why is it? It's not, I found that even in teaching, it wasn't enough to have a perfect body because there's no such thing, right? That's what you complain about. So let's say you get the perfect body, then what? Mm-hmm. And so what was interesting is that question, now what, is huge for women in these transitional points. And I always was very spiritual, but I'll tell you, my spirituality became, heightened when I was 16. There was a tragedy in my home. My father was murdered, and it was a huge, shift for my entire family. I'm the youngest of 5. I lived in Ohio, and it was this shocking tragedy that hit our whole community. And I navigated that. I had a lot of support. I always have. but it made me really, first of all, I feel like I had a moment where I was completely calm, and where something inside of me said, you can handle this.
Mm.
And I realized later that it created a deep curiosity in me. First of all, the feeling that I had that I was watched or I was being held was really something I'll never forget, because it was so real and I trusted it. And I don't know if I would call that God, but I felt there was a huge opening. So I was always a seeker, and I was looking, but I wasn't necessarily looking at Judaism. In fact, I was really angry at Judaism. I mean, my question came, like Harold Kushner's book, how do such good things, how could such bad things happen to a good person? And because he was a nice Jewish man, and he, followed the laws. We were conservative Jews, all of those things. And yet, how could this have happened? And why did I deserve this, not growing up with a father? So that was always in the back of my mind. But when you start to ask those big questions, it is, who really am I? What are the things I had no control over and that I need to work on? And also, what's my purpose? Well, I'll never forget, of course, I tried dream work, and I looked into philosophies, and at that time, Ram Dass and Buddhism and all of these religions that I love, did a ton of reading, did a lot of yoga and a lot of meditation. And one time I was in a yoga class and I was asked to find my Christ consciousness. And I thought, something said to me again, you don't have a Christ consciousness. Now that was, I've later understood what that really meant. It can be interpreted differently, but I realized at that moment that I needed to go back to find out why I was Jewish and what that meant, because I realized there's very few things that we have zero control over, and that's what we're born into. Whether we like our families or not, we at least have to know what the purpose of that family was and use that as a strength to grow. So if I didn't want to be Jewish later, that's one thing, but I needed to go deeply in to go out to make those decisions, and not based on what my mother or father said, not what the rabbi said. I wanted to know what was true and real.
And if I can ask, how old
Yeah.
were you when you started really starting the building blocks of this again?
I would say I was 40. It was after the fitness world, right? And I was transitioning. My children were getting older. My ex-husband and I had the means, and he said, I want you to do what you really want to do. And what was growing was this love for synagogue, because I went back to synagogue, and I went to a very open-minded community, and I started to become friends with a cantor. Now, I also love to sing. And so she would have me, and I knew all of the prayers because I grew up conservative, and it was a Reformed synagogue at the time. And I started to really fall in love with that job, and just the ability to be of service and to sing and to embrace, who I was. So I thought, well, do you want to really do this? And a school appeared. I was probably the first student on the doorstep, the Academy of Jewish Religion in Los Angeles, and I applied. And I did. In the other rabbinic schools and cantorial schools, you had to live in Israel for a year, and I couldn't do that. But this school didn't. So I stopped my old profession in the fitness world, and I decided that I wanted to bring wellness to Judaism in the back of my mind. But I first had to go through the more conservative steps, which I was willing to do, so I could have that title and I could be able to speak. Now, that being said, right before that time, in my spiritual work, found a partner that I wrote with, and wrote two books one called Minding the Temple of the Soul, and one called Entering the Temple of Dreams. Because I began my search, and I went back to look at, well, what were those things in Judaism, those prayers that set you up for a day? And what were those prayers that closed down your day, and why? And how did that work? And where was the body in Judaism? And so almost 25 years ago, we wrote these books and really researched what happened and why there wasn't a yoga for Judaism and why there wasn't more talk on these home rituals. And that's something that today is relevant and needed, because we don't live in a world that helps us wake up in the morning, except in wellness circles. How do I, how do I bring my tradition into my life so it doesn't feel like a disconnect? And how do I close the day with it? Because it's beautiful. And most of the wellness things are based on that. So I think I answered your question. Did I?
Yeah, no, you did. And just two things as I'm thinking about it. One is that I'm going to butcher this phrase, the Buddhist approach of when you're ready for the lesson, the teacher arrives.
That's it.
And that seems like that's what you're describing when you were ready to go to rabbinical school and when you found your synagogue. And the other is that when I was thinking about you, about going from fitness to faith, that feels like very disparate ways to go. But as I thought about it further, it really is very similar, isn't it? It's just different parts of what we need to strengthen and flex and test in our lives, whether it's physical, spiritual, or mental.
Yes. And it's a beautiful metaphor, what you're saying. The body speaks to you as it gets stronger. It does tell you what it needs to eat. And if you listen, how much sleep you need. But, having navigated that wellness field, and I'm still very much a part of it, I also am aware that mind, body, soul, although that was talked about a long time ago, it's very relevant now. And along with that, it's not just soul, it's spirit. It's your spirit in traditional religion, which got lost. And that's an interesting thing as well. We live in a world, we go to a gym, we go to work, we go to our spiritual circles, you go to a drum circle, whatever those things are. And there's really one place where it could all be. And that's what I hoped to create. And yet that's a very difficult call, but it's all in this physical body. And in these prayers in the morning, it reminds you every morning that there's a soul in this physical body. And there's an interconnection, a marriage between the physical body and the soul. And that we have to deal with that. Like that's our vehicle to go through this, lifetime in.
Why is it so, I don't know if hard is the right word, but we'll talk about physical, we will share all sorts of intimate details about our sex lives or about our relationships, but there's something very private and I don't even know what the word is. There's something very private about our spiritual lives. And there are many people I know that I've known for years, and I still don't know yet, do they go to church? What do they believe? Why is it so hard for us to talk about our spiritual lives?
I believe that there's a God component and there is a feeling of fear and guilt that is left over from our childhood. It's like of being judged. And I think that what you're also referring to is, will I be rejected, or will someone laugh, or will they judge me? Because it happens. And so it is a private thing, just like where you lean politically. There's just, there's so many differences of opinion, and there's a fear that maybe I'm on the wrong track, or maybe they'll, think that I'm, for myself, a super Jew, and I won't listen to other faiths, which I find fascinating, and I'm very open to. I find that it is a personal thing, and that's why I do what I do. I want to have those secret conversations that you're too afraid to ask your pastor, or you're too afraid to ask the rabbi. The first thing I say is there's not any stupid question, and I'll repeat. Anytime you have the question, I find it's fine to just keep repeating, because we have to hear things more than once. Because of that, and I know that the way that I minister is very personal, because I want to find out the disconnects that happened in your life that turned you off or turned you on. I want to help you open up that communication. And if you don't believe in God, that's fine. But let's make sure that it's not the God that your parents told you to be afraid of and feel guilty about. Make sure that God evolves for you, because I don't believe in that God either. I don't believe in a punisher. I believe that God is loving, and it's like it's a way to open you, not to shut you down, and that there are stages of belief, and that we need a lot of room to have that discussion. So I think that you don't ask that question because it's very personal, and maybe that's why I do ask that question, because I want to be really personal with you, and I want to help you explore.
And so since it is personal, how does one begin?
Isn't that how does one begin everything? Because there is so much fear. But it's just by making the first phone call. For myself, if you were to look at my website and you were like, well, how do you start? Just let's talk. The first time you come to my website, it says, let's have a consultation. It's free. Come and ask a question. If you don't like the answer, great. But I love getting to know people where they are spiritually. It's so beautiful. And I don't have a judgment about that, because it's all human. And we have our beliefs for different reasons. I only ask that you're open. But I think that's the first step, is just making that phone call. I got a call yesterday. It's a woman who wants to convert to Judaism. And I could sense that she was really nervous. And she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I finally made this call. And I really wanted to find out about it, but I just kept putting this off. And she said, I made that first step. And I said, yeah, that's how we start. That's all you had to do. So finish the day really knowing that you just took that first step.
Well, and along the way, since it sounds like you have a lot of beginner believers or folks coming back, what surprises you about this journey?
The biggest surprise is that I find is when they walk through the doorway, the first thing they say, almost everybody says to me, is, I'm not religious. Like, they're so afraid. Like, I'm Jewish, but I'm not religious. Or I'm a bad Jew. Love that. And I say, and I laugh and I say, so am I. And I'm not religious either, because there is this past, I guess we get lost in our judgments and how we see things. And a lot has changed. Even that I'm a woman cantor rabbi, that's a change. And what I'm there to do is to update most people. So when they say that, I first of all say to them, no one goes to synagogue that I know of on a daily basis anymore, unless you're Orthodox. It just doesn't happen. So I'm a rabbi, and rabbis aren't going to synagogue every day. And that seems to be this caveat. If they didn't have a bar bat mitzvah, it's really been such a overhanging thing. If I don't go to temple, I'm not Jewish. Well, I've had to become that kind of open temple, very much like the title of my books. It's the temple of your soul. And that can be enough. Now, in some circles, it's not. In my circle of Jewish people and Jewish followers, it is. So I guess you have to go to the people who share the similar beliefs.
But it sounds like the folks who are interested in what you represent, that's growing, because you're based here in Los Angeles, but you and I are talking today and you're in North Texas because you're doing some additional broader work there, correct?
Yes. And surprisingly, it's a more conservative community, which is not always open to expanding, into these more esoteric ideas, Kabbalah, some of the mystical, some of these alternative ways. Nachshon Minyan, the synagogue that I lead, was all about that. Let's be on the cutting edge, but also hold on to tradition. Make ritual rich and something that is going to really nourish you and change you, because that's the Jewish experience. It's not what happens necessarily in temple. so that I think was one of the things that you were asking is what surprises me, this, that the children actually are bringing the parents back. The children want it, and the parents are like, are you sure? They don't, we have to go to temple. And the kids that I've worked with over the last 15 years say, yeah, it's fun, and the kids used to come to my Hebrew school. The reason I started teaching religious school is because they were skipping and they came early. Those things surprised me. And it was them, which I hope restores hope to any of your listeners too. Maybe temple services, church services are diminishing, or not, people are diminishing their, whether they're members or not. That next generation just doesn't want to practice the same way you are. Mm-hmm. They want to come to me and they want to know more of the good stuff, the meaty stuff, the history, what the scripture says, how it's learned, what was said in ancient times, what that looked like, what are the trends, how do people believe after the Holocaust? That's the stuff I love talking about. And you don't have to agree with me either. I mean, we're arguers by nature, so.
Speaking of ritual, you and I were talking a little earlier about the celebration for the Jewish New Year. Will you describe it again? Because that sounds so amazing.
I agree. And in thinking about the high holidays this year, I wanted to bring something different. I usually spend a lot of time, what could be different? What could be a hook? I decided that I was going to build on this beautiful old tradition called tashlich. Now, the word tashlich in Hebrew means to cast your sins on the river, on a running body of water. And that whole word of sin, and to say cast it off, it's old. So we're dealing with antiques here, and we have to shine them up a little. But the ritual is the experience that I'm interested in, because it's taking crumbs from probably lunch, but breadcrumbs, and then, embedding into those crumbs the things that are in your way, the things that that are the crumbs at the bottom of your purse, or when you're cleaning out a drawer that hide in those corners. Mm-hmm. Because those things are actually what the High Holidays is about. Looking at those little character flaws, not your sins like you're a bad person, but they should be called flaws. And I actually play with the word and call them toxins. I play on that word so that it's not a turnoff. Like, I'm not going to temple to confess how bad I am. That's not the point. It's this gentle, beautiful process that's embodied in this little ritual, and taking these breadcrumbs that are messing you up, or they're your resentments that you don't look at. They are your fears, your anxiety. That's in your way. And throwing them on the water is releasing them. And that feeling of release is so powerful. And this year, what I'm doing to bring something more is, when you release, you've got empty space. And I think we need to remember that if we don't put in those places, the places where people have hurt, our disappointments, our anger, if we make space, take the anger out, we have to plant something good in there. So we're going to be planting seeds, and with our other hand, tossing seeds of inspiration and intention that will replace those places. So that little piece is about riding on the waves of forgiveness. And that idea of forgiveness in Judaism is called teshuvah. It's not letting somebody off the hook. It's not saying it was okay. It's really stepping into it and calling it what it is. And forgiveness has one is, you have to grant forgiveness to somebody. You have to ask forgiveness. And the biggest one I have many people focus on is forgiving yourself for just not being who you think you're supposed to be. Forgiving yourself for not finishing everything on your list, little things. And so that ritual I really want it to be at the beach, because the beach is so nurturing. it's so connected to nature. It's the sound of Mother Nature, right? It's that natural steady rhythm. The sand is actually, in truth, it pulls out any negativity. The ions on the water are positive. What better place to be in synagogue, in a sense? What better way? We'll have journals. Well, I'm going to teach. And the best part of it is when you begin, you're going to hear sound bowls.
Mm.
I'm going to do a little ceremony of sound bowls because they're not just a new thing. They're scientifically proven, the sound of them, and these particular crystalline bowls that are infused with herbs and with minerals and with metals that we need in our bodies, they actually penetrate into our nervous system and balance it. And the decisions that we have to make to let go or to bring something new in has to be made when we're in that neutral state. Mm-hmm. So we make the right decisions for ourselves and we don't base it on fear or what everybody else wants us to do. And so that will be a part of the ritual, and it's really never been done. I'm extending it from, for a couple hours. So you really can think about it and not make a rash decision, and also be loving. And I want it to be gentle. And then we'll blow the shofar and we'll sing the prayers together, and you're invited to stay for a picnic dinner, watch the sunset, which is such a wonderful tradition that we've always done. We just never made it that focused and really never created so much energy around it. But it's been around forever.
And probably outdoors more than inside. So this feels very ritual, right?
And I grew up in Ohio, so there was never a beach. And now we have an excuse that we get to be at the beach. So I want to take advantage of that. Yeah.
And for our viewers and listeners, we will for sure have all the information up on our site, and so that anyone who wants to participate and is here in the Los Angeles area can do so. This also feels, as you're describing it, a blend of other faiths as well, that God hates a negative space, right? So you can't just remove what those bad habits were, or those intrusive thoughts. You have to put something else in there that is more intentional, right?
Yeah. Well, what I love that you're saying also, and it occurred to me, you don't have to be Jewish to do this. There are so many practices that are called, we could call it a reset, we could call it a year of tracking your life and really taking a look at, how am I doing? Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to bridge for many Jewish people is let them know that that's what it's about. When I say that's the underbelly of going to services and going through these, things that you think you have to do, and the family dinners and everything, there's really a spiritual structure. And there's a spiritual structure to our lives. We have apps that keep us on track, and we have all of these things that true religions share so many of these beautiful practices. I know that the Persian community, whether they're Christian or Jewish, Buddhism, these tangible things that wake us up. Some people, some religions throw flowers on the water. It's the act of doing that. Mm-hmm. And I want to create a space also that's inclusive. I don't care how you want to, talk about yourself. We all are so separate at this time. My hope is that this ceremony I can hold as a safe space, a very safe space to just kind of melt into who you are and how your year is going to make you into the best person you can be.
And you touched on something, it does feel still isolated. I mean, we got through COVID and the lockdown, and we all yearned for being together in person again. And what you're describing, I think, meets a lot of what we're all searching for. But at the same time, it all still feels very separate and difficult, right? What do you find from the people who find you about community and loneliness?
Well, that's the most important thing that you're bringing up right now. And there's a lot of things that can fill that space of loneliness and fear. because there's a fear of stepping into the wrong community,
Mm-hmm.
like, and not being able to run away fast enough. There's a fear of trying something new. The hardest thing is to assure people it's a safe space. If it's not the right space, you don't have to be there. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be there. And I think that you have to push yourself. You need a friend to pull you. That's a piece that everyone is feeling. You know, we long in our lives to have meaning and purpose, but COVID had us go inside, which in some ways was really good because you were stuck with yourself. But that isn't the end result, because between you being stuck with yourself and Netflix, not a great combination after a while. That gets very lonely. And even to admit that you were lonely was such a hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
The circles that I created online. So this is yet another time to have a leap of faith. Nachshon Synagogue is named Nachshon. Very few people can even pronounce that. I have to go say Nachshon. But Nachshon, because we share the Bible, all of us share the same, origins, any monotheists. Nachshon was a friend of Moses's, and he was with that whole group that left, slavery. And think about it. That's a profound connection as well. Slavery, when you're a slave, you have no identity.
Mm-hmm.
But here's this group that leaves that and are standing at the water's edge, which we will be standing at the water's edge. And we don't have the Pharaoh's warriors after us. But at that moment, it was Nachshon who started to walk into the water to say, God, I'm here. I'm going to come halfway. That's when the water split. And he's known for taking a leap of faith. And that's what I'm living up to that. I'm taking a leap of faith to do something really different this year. Really, not many people would veer from tradition. And because I can feel that it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that you will all come along for the ride, because it's going to be beautiful. And it's a tradition that we need to do every year, because we evolve. We are in a spiral of evolving, and Judaism's cycle of the year, which is what I'm going to be teaching all year. So it's not just that one event, is really using those times and letting them know they're going somewhere. There's a whole circle that we're going to return back to at 12 o'clock. And if you're thinking about a clock, I'll be there again next year, because I'm starting something that I want to continue. But that's one of the beautiful things about Judaism and bringing people back to it. And what was beautiful through COVID. You may not follow all the rules and regulations, but the traditions are steady.
Mm-hmm.
They change for thousands of years. And it was something to lean on when everything was shaking. And that's what I find so beautiful about what I want to give to others, is that we're in a time where everything's shaking. We want to know what's real. And this small ritual that I'm offering, and I will be offering bits and pieces of that throughout the year, is your opportunity to stay grounded, to stay connected to your heart. And whether you're Jewish or not, it is a reminder. I'm just guiding you to remember who you truly are.
I just wish we have short lives here on earth, and spiritual growth takes so long. I feel like I'm going to get one thing done, and then God's going to go, okay, time is up. It feels like we have a lot of work to do.
Well, but it's also looking at all you've done. See, that's the other piece, is that I think it's our culture. I think it's how we get trained. Like, oh, I've wasted time. The time is right now. And spiritual growth is not about the workshops you go to. It's not about going to Bali, and it's not about, how many sound classes you go to, or yoga classes, because I'm one of those people that would show up all the time. No matter how much you do, you always feel like you're beginning again. And so it's really to embrace that in this being where I am right now, it's enough. That's the first thing. And that there's so much more to go. Unfortunately, it's not in our hands, but only thing that counts, and this is why I picked Tashlich especially. It's where you're lingering in the doorway. You're literally stopping, which we never do, to think that in that doorway, one step and you're in the future, you're heading for the future, but one step is in the past. And to really linger in that in-between stage is uncomfortable. But to know that there's something you can do where you can start with a list of all the good things you did, all the things that you overcame. You must track and receive that. And I'm going to talk about that. We don't do that enough. Why not start the year rather than look at your sins? That's easy. I can tell you what's bad about me, but to look at all that you accomplished, that takes some time. And I mean brushing your teeth. I mean, did you smile? It's not big things. And that's spirituality. It's in the little things, the simple things that we need to get back to, because we have so many lists. We're so busy being spiritual that we're like a wreck.
That's true. That's true, right?
Oh, I missed that thing. Oh, I'm not here. You're here right now. Right now.
Oh. So how can people find you? Tell us again your books. Give us everything we need to know.
Okay. The new website, which I hope you'll all take a look at and look under events, is rabbicantorjudy.org. And when you go there, do it in your upper, don't just do it through Google, go to the www so you can find me. The books that I wrote are on there as well. The first one is called Minding the Temple of the Soul. It's traditional prayers that are, there's 3 or 4 of them that line you up, get you ready for the day. And there's traditional prayers in the second book, which is called Entering the Temple of Dreams, that close down your day and prepare you for dream time, because that's a whole thing unto itself. Yeah, and it's about, really honoring that day and receiving what it gave to you. And there's a little area in there about, hey, forgive me if I snubbed you or didn't know you were there and I hurt your feelings, on a daily basis, so that when we get to the big time of the year, you've, kind of been dusting the area. So it's not like it's not overwhelming. You can find me on this website. There's a free consultation. It's www.rabbicantorjudy.org. And go ahead and look through the things we're doing. I have a community I'm connected to that is being built as we speak, because there's people like yourself who are at new stages of your life. Nachshon is at a new stage in its life of growth. And it's not a done deal. There's always room. It's not like it's gone on without you. You didn't miss anything. And I'm starting classes and groups all year round. There's a monthly sound bath. There is art, that we call it art, that connects you to your soul and to understanding more about what these ancient religions are about. There is Kabbalah that I'm teaching in January. We're doing a Shahike in October, connecting to more nature that we need to. And so I just hope you'll come and just take a look and come to one class. You're invited. And then if this resonates for you, you get a membership subscription and you're on the docket, but you always will be. And I can't wait to hear from you and have discussions with you, even if they're just questions. There's so much to teach you, and there's so much, so many ways of looking at your life and connecting with others.
Rabbi, I think this is the start of a conversation. We're going to have to come back and follow up, but thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was such a pleasure and honor to be on your show and meet you. I hope I'll see you there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be there. Thanks again. Please follow, like, and leave a review. It really helps. We're on all your favorite platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And to connect, you can email me at Deborah@dareful1.com. That's Deborah, Debra, at Dareful1, that's with the number 1.com. Thanks for listening.